The heavy, humid scent of ripening jasmine and damp earth clings to your skin long before you open your eyes. It is a thick, floral sweetness that speaks of the coming heat, a reminder that the world is waking up even as you linger in the soft transition between dreams and the day's labor. You lie still for a moment on your woven bamboo mat, feeling the slight indentation where your weight has rested through the night, listening to the rhythmic, distant thrum of the forest. Somewhere far off, a gibbon calls out to its mate, a long looping sound that carries over the canopy, and you feel the familiar dull ache in your lower back. A souvenir of yesterday's hours spent leaning over drafts and measuring chords. The air is perfectly still, yet you can sense the water nearby. It is always there, the great lake, the Tonle Sap, breathing like a massive liquid lung in the heart of the kingdom. During these months, the waters are retreating, leaving behind a rich, silken silt that clings to the soles of your feet as you finally stand and step out onto the wooden veranda of your home. The wood is smooth, worn down by years of your own footsteps, and it feels cool against your skin in the pre-dawn grey. You look out toward the horizon where the world is not yet gold, but a deep, bruised purple. The lake is a mirror, vast and silent, its edges blurred by the rising mist that curls around the stilts of the houses like a shy spirit. This is the rhythm of your life in the 12th century, a life dictated by the pulse of the water and the will of the heavens. In the distance, the silhouettes of the great stone structures, already built by the ancestors, rise like jagged mountains against the sky. But they are not the mountains you are thinking of today. Today, your mind is occupied by a vision that is much larger, much grander, and far more demanding than anything the world has ever seen. You reach up to rub the back of your neck, feeling the tension in your shoulders. You are an architect in the service of the king, and the weight of his ambition is a physical thing you carry with you, as tangible as the stone blocks being quarried in the hills to the north. Suryavarman II is not merely a ruler to you, he is the Devaraja, the God King. The blood of the gods flows through his veins, and his word is the bridge between the celestial realms and the mud of the rice paddies. For years you have sat in his presence, head bowed, listening as he spoke of a terrestrial residence for the great protector, Vishnu. He does not want a simple temple or a mere place of worship. He desires a microcosm of the entire universe, a mountain of stone that will stand at the center of the world, capturing the very essence of the divine in sandstone and laterite. As you prepare your morning meal of simple rice and fermented fish, the smoke from the small cooking fire stings your eyes and clings to your hair, but you hardly notice. You are tracing the lines of the galleries in your mind, calculating the width of the moats that must be dug to represent the cosmic oceans. Before we journey deeper into the dust and the stone of this great undertaking, I hope you are finding peace as you settle in for the night. You are here with us at the Slumber Archives, where we gather every evening to explore the quiet corners of history together. We share new narrations just like this one every single day, so if you find these stories help you drift into a restful sleep, please do consider subscribing so you never miss a night. If you feel inclined, leaving a like on this video helps others who are seeking a quiet rest to find us too. But for now, let us return to the damp morning air of Cambodia and the monumental task that lies before you. The sun finally begins to breach the tree line, not with a roar, but with a soft, peach-colored light that turns the mist into a glowing veil. You step down from your house and begin the walk toward the construction site, your feet finding the familiar path through the tall grass. The dew is heavy, soaking the hem of your linen sarong, the fabric clinging to your calves with a cold, wet weight. You pass groups of labourers already moving toward the work site, their voices low and melodic, punctuated by the occasional clink of metal tools. There is a specific smell to this empire in the making, a mixture of wet clay, freshly cut timber, and the sharp metallic tang of worked iron. It is the smell of a civilization trying to outlast time itself. As you reach the edge of the great clearing, the sheer scale of the vision hits you anew. It is a landscape of organized chaos. Thousands of men move like ants across the red earth, their bodies bronzed by the sun, their movements slow and deliberate to conserve energy in the growing heat. You walk toward the center, toward the place where the foundations are being laid, and you stop to run your hand over a finished block of sandstone. It is smooth, almost buttery to the touch, having been rubbed down with sand and water until the seams between the stones are nearly invisible. You think of the king's command that this temple should be his funerary home, a place where his soul will merge with Vishnu for all eternity. It is a heavy responsibility to build a house for a god and a tomb for a king in the same breath. You find your station, a shaded pavilion, where your assistants have already laid out the palm leaf manuscripts and the measuring rods. The charcoal sticks are ready, and the smell of the ink, dark and earthy, reminds you of the long nights spent under the flicker of oil lamps, trying to reconcile the geometry of the earth with the geometry of the stars. You look up at the rising tiers of the central towers, which are still mostly scaffolding and hope. They are meant to represent the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, the home of the gods. To build them, you must understand balance, not just of weight and gravity, but of spirit. If the proportions are off by even the width of a finger, the harmony of the kingdom could be shattered. The king believes that the prosperity of the harvest, the flooding of the lake, and the peace of the borders all depend on the perfection of this stone mountain. The heat is beginning to settle in now, a thick, pulsating warmth that makes the air shimmer. You feel a bead of sweat trickle down your spine, disappearing into the waistband of your cloth. You pick up a measuring cord, the hemp rough against your palms, and walk toward the western entrance. The orientation is unusual. Most temples face the rising sun in the east, but this one, this Angkor Wat, faces the west. It is the direction of the setting sun, the direction of the afterlife, and the direction sacred to Vishnu. It feels like a defiance of tradition, a bold statement of the king's unique divinity. As you stand there, looking down the long axis of what will be the greatest monument in the world, you feel a strange sense of both insignificance and immense power. You are just one man, your bones destined to return to the earth, yet your hands are shaping the very features of the gods. The rhythm of the day takes over. There are disputes to settle between the master masons, calculations to verify regarding the drainage of the massive moats, and the constant underlying worry about the seasonal rains. If the monsoons come too early, the soft earth will swallow the heavy stones before they can be joined. You move through the site with a slow, measured pace, your eyes scanning every corner, every carving, every joint. You notice a young carver working on a bas-relief of an apsara, a celestial dancer. He is tapping gently at the stone, his movements almost like a heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. The figure seems to be emerging from the rock, her stone jewelry delicate enough to flutter in a breeze that isn't there. You watch him for a moment, appreciating the patience required to turn hard mountain heart into something that looks like soft flesh. As the morning progresses, the sound of the site grows, a symphony of industry. The low lowing of the water buffalo pulling the heavy sledges, the rhythmic chanting of the men as they heave the stones into place, and the constant, high-pitched ring of the chisels. It is a meditative sound, a drone that fills the ears and settles into the bones. You find yourself swaying slightly with the rhythm of it all. The ambition of Surya Varman is no longer just a concept. It is a living, breathing entity, growing out of the Cambodian soil. You think of the Great Lake again, the Tonle Sap, which is currently shrinking, giving back the land so that you may build upon it. In a few months, the rivers will reverse their flow, the lake will swell to many times its size, and the temple will sit like an island in a vast, man-made sea. This balance between the water and the stone is the secret of your people. You do not fight the landscape, you mirror it. You do not defy the gods, you invite them to stay. As you lean over your drawings, the sun high enough now to cast short dark shadows, you feel the weight of the centuries ahead. You wonder if, in 1,000 years, someone will stand where you are standing and feel the same stillness in the air, the same scent of jasmine and wet earth. You wonder if they will look at these towers and understand the vision of the God King, or if they will only see the stone. But for now, the stone is enough. The work is enough. You take a deep breath, feeling the warm air fill your lungs, and reach for your charcoal. There is a gallery to finish, a mountain to build, and a god to house before the sun sets over the western moat. Your fingers are stained grey with the dust of the charcoal, a fine powdery residue that settles into the creases of your palms like memories of the earth itself. As a sthapati, your title carries the weight of the heavens, yet your life is measured in the tactile reality of grit, geometry, and the slow, rhythmic sound of chisels meeting sandstone. You are more than a builder. You are the bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial, the one whose mind must hold the infinite proportions of the universe while your feet remain firmly planted in the red clay of the Mekong floodplain. The king has commanded a mountain of stone, but it is you who must ensure that this mountain breathes in harmony with the cosmos. You look down at the grid you have painstakingly laid out on the smoothed surface of a courtyard block. This is the Vastupurusha Mandala, the sacred square that governs all existence. To the uninitiated, it looks like a simple series of intersecting lines, a cage of 81 smaller squares, but as you trace the perimeter with a calloused thumb, you feel the presence of the Purusha, the cosmic man, the primordial being who was sacrificed to create the world. He lies face down within this grid, his head to the northeast, his limbs folded to fit the perfect symmetry of the square. Every pillar you raise, every gallery you carve must align with his body. To deviate by the width of a single hair would be to invite chaos into the kingdom, to build a house that the gods would refuse to inhabit. The air around you is thick with the scent of sawdust from the scaffolding and the distant metallic tang of the ironworks. You feel a familiar ache in your lower back, a dull throb born from hours of leaning over blueprints and measuring rods, but you find a strange comfort in the physical toll of the work. It grounds you. It reminds you that while the philosophy of the temple is eternal, the construction is a deeply human endeavor. You move your gaze from the charcoal sketch to the horizon, where the great towers of the central sanctuary are beginning to pierce the hazy sky. They are not merely buildings. They are the peaks of Mount Meru, the golden mountain at the center of the universe where the gods reside. Your task is to translate that invisible, divine geography into a language of volume and shadow. To do this, you have become a master of the stars. You remember the long nights spent on the upper terraces of the older temples, wrapped in a heavy cotton shawl against the damp chill of the midnight air. You watch the slow rotation of the heavens, marking the path of the sun as it tracked across the sky, and the way the shadows of the gnomon crawled across the stone floors. You know that on the day of the spring equinox, the sun must rise exactly over the central peak of Angkor Wat, a perfect alignment that signals the balance of light and dark. This precision is not for vanity. It is a clock made of stone, a way to tether the kingdom of the Khmer to the rhythmic pulse of the universe. As you adjust a measurement on your grid, you think of the way the light will wash over the bas-reliefs of the churning of the ocean of milk, illuminating the gods and demons at the precise moment the seasons turn. The mathematics you employ are ancient, passed down through generations of master builders, whispered from teacher to student, until they became as natural to you as breathing. You work with the hasta, the standard unit of measurement based on the length of a man's forearm. It is a deeply personal scale, ensuring that the temple remains in proportion to the human body even as it reaches for the clouds. You calculate the ratios of the courtyards and the heights of the towers using sequences that mirror the cycles of time. The 4 great ages of the world, the yugas, each lasting hundreds of thousands of years. By embedding these numbers into the very foundations of the temple, you are ensuring that the merit of the king will endure as long as time itself. You step across a pile of discarded stone chips, the rough surface of the ground biting gently into the soles of your feet. You stop beside a young apprentice who is struggling with the alignment of a doorframe. You don't speak at first, you simply place your hand on the stone, feeling its coolness, its stubborn weight. You show him how to use the plumb line, letting the weight settle until it hangs perfectly still, a silver thread of gravity pointing toward the heart of the earth. You explain that the temple is a living thing, a prasada that must be nourished by correct proportion. If the base is too wide, the spirit cannot rise. If the spire is too tall, it will lose its connection to the soil. The sun is higher now, and the heat begins to radiate off the pale grey stone, making the air shimmer. You wipe the sweat from your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a smear of charcoal behind. You think of the cosmology you are manifesting, the moat representing the cosmic ocean, the outer walls the ring of mountains that encircle the world. Every step a pilgrim takes toward the inner sanctum is a journey toward the center of themselves, a gradual shedding of the outer world. You are the one who designs the path, the one who creates the rhythm of their footsteps through the long, echoing galleries. As you walk toward the western entrance, you pass a group of stonecutters who are beginning to rough out a lintel. They look to you for a nod of approval, and you give it, though your mind is already moving ahead, calculating the weight of the roof stones for the 3rd enclosure. You feel the immense responsibility of your role. The sthapati is not just an architect, but a priest of the material world. You must appease the spirits of the land before the first stone is laid, and you must maintain a state of ritual purity so that your designs remain untainted. You often find yourself waking in the pre-dawn silence, the geometry of the temple dancing behind your closed eyelids, circles and squares intersecting in a silent, golden dance. The mathematics of the temple are a form of prayer. You think of the number 81, the square of 9, and how it repeats throughout the design. You think of the distance between the towers, which corresponds to the days of the lunar calendar. It is a complex, beautiful puzzle that only you and a few others truly understand. To the farmers in the fields and the soldiers on the walls, this is simply a magnificent house for Vishnu. But to you, it is a mathematical proof of the divine order. You feel a quiet sense of pride, a stillness in your chest, as you realize that even when the king is gone, and even when your own name is forgotten by the winds of history, these proportions will remain. The stone may weather, the jungle may attempt to reclaim the galleries, but the geometry is eternal. You pause by a shallow pool of rainwater that has collected in a depression in the stone. In its reflection, you see the silhouette of the central tower framed by the drifting clouds. For a moment, the reflection and the reality seem to merge, and you feel the true power of the Vastu Purusha Mandala. It is a map of the soul, a blueprint for the spirit to find its way home. You reach down and touch the water, shattering the image into 1,000 ripples, but the knowledge remains steady in your mind. You turn back to your charcoal and your grid, the weight of the mountain feeling lighter now, for you know exactly where every grain of sand belongs. The sun continues its journey, the shadows lengthen across the courtyard, and you continue to draw, weaving the stars into the stone, one line at a time. The scent of wet earth and ancient moss clings to your skin, a reminder that before the temple can rise from the plains, it must first be liberated from the heart of the world. You look toward the north, where the horizon is defined not by the flat expanse of the floodplains, but by the rising, hazy blue silhouette of the Kulen mountains. To your people, this is Mahendra Parvata, the great mountain of Indra, the sacred womb of the earth, where the very bones of the gods are kept in the form of fine-grained, grey-pink sandstone. It is a place of mist and waterfalls, a plateau that stands nearly 300 meters above the valley floor, watching over the budding empire like a silent guardian. You know that every pillar, every lintel, and every delicate apsara that will eventually grace the walls of Angkor Wat is currently sleeping within those cliffs, waiting for your command to wake. The journey to the Quarries is a pilgrimage of its own, a slow ascent into a realm where the air grows cooler and the humidity of the jungle feels heavy and sweet. When you visit the work sites, the sound reaches you long before the sight of the stone, a rhythmic metallic clinking that echoes through the trees like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. You walk along the quarry face, your feet finding purchase on the uneven floor of discarded chips and fine stone dust that coats your sandals in a pale, ghostly powder. Here, the labor is not a matter of brute force alone, but a patient conversation between man and mineral. You watch as the stonemasons mark the grain of the rock with charcoal, following the invisible lines you have dictated in your scrolls. They do not use iron sledges to shatter the stone. Such violence would create fractures that might not reveal themselves until a century after the temple is finished. Instead, they use the wisdom of the elements. You stop to observe a master mason as he hammers a series of wooden wedges into a line of precisely carved holes. The thud of the mallet is dull and solid against the wood. Once the wedges are driven deep, the workers pour water over them, soaking the dry timber until it begins to swell. You stand in the shade of a towering fern, watching the slow, invisible pressure build within the rock. It is a quiet process, one that requires the patience of a monk. You can almost feel the tension in your own shoulders as the wood expands, pushing against the ancient pressure of the mountain. And then, a sharp, clean crack echoes through the clearing, a sound like a single clap of thunder. The massive block, weighing as much as 3 elephants, separates from the cliffside with a surgical precision that leaves the surface as smooth as a planed board. You reach out and run your hand over the fresh break. The stone is cool, damp with the moisture of 1,000,000 years, and remarkably soft to the touch before the air has a chance to harden it. But extracting the stone is only the beginning of the miracle. As you look out over the edge of the plateau, you see the true scale of the challenge you have set for the kingdom. Thousands of these blocks, millions eventually, must descend from these heights and travel more than 35 miles across the sodden landscape to reach the site of the temple. In the past, stone was moved by ox cart or dragged along grueling overland routes, a process so slow that it stifled the ambitions of kings. But for this mountain of God, you have envisioned something far more elegant. You have directed the engineers to carve a network of canals, a silver thread of water that links the base of the Kulen foothills directly to the heart of the city. The logistics of it are staggering, a feat of hydraulic grace that mirrors the flow of the blood through a body. You walk down to the loading docks where the canals begin, the water dark and still, reflecting the overhanging canopy. Huge bamboo rafts are lashed together, reinforced with thick ropes of hemp and rattan. You watch as the massive sandstone blocks are slid onto these vessels, the wood groaning under the immense weight but holding firm. Once they are afloat, the journey becomes a matter of rhythm and current. During the monsoon season, when the rains turn the world into a mirror of the sky, the canals swell, and the stone moves with a ghostly ease. It is as if the earth itself is offering up its weight, allowing the water to carry the burden that would break the backs of 1,000 men. You think of the sheer volume of material that must pass through these narrow waterways. Your temple will require more stone than the Great Pyramid of Giza, yet it will not be a simple pile of rock. It will be a complex, interlocking puzzle of galleries and towers. Every block that floats past you on its way to the site has a specific destination, a preordained place in the grand geometry of your design. You feel a quiet sense of awe at the industry you have unleashed, the thousands of laborers, the boatmen, the carvers, and the engineers, all working in a silent, coordinated dance to move a mountain from one place to another. The air here smells of wood smoke and wet stone, a scent that you have come to associate with the birth of something eternal. As you begin your descent back toward the plains, following the path of the loaded rafts, you pass through villages where the children stop to watch the stone go by. To them, these grey slabs are just rocks, but to you, they are the vessels of the divine. You imagine them being lifted into place, stacked with such precision that no mortar is required, the weight of the stone alone holding the universe together. You think of the friction between the blocks, the way they will be rubbed together with water and sand until the joints vanish, creating a single seamless surface that looks as though it was carved from a single piece of the world. The sun begins to filter through the leaves in long golden shafts, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. You feel the slow ache in your lower back from the long day of walking, a physical weight that mirrors the responsibility you carry. But there is a profound peace in the repetition, in the knowledge that the mountains are moving because you willed it so. The canal stretches out before you, a straight line of water cutting through the emerald green of the rice paddies, leading your eyes toward the distant, rising scaffolding of the temple site. There, the stone will lose its identity as a piece of the Kulen mountains and become something new, a pillar of heaven, a sanctuary for the soul, a mountain of God that will stand long after your own name has faded into the whispers of the wind. You pause by the bank of the canal, watching a raft disappear around a bend in the river. The water ripples and then settles, returning to its glass-like state. You realize that you are not just building a monument, you are orchestrating a symphony of earth and water, a transformation of the landscape that will redefine the very shape of the kingdom. The stone is heavy, yes, but the vision is buoyant. And as you turn your face toward the evening breeze, you feel the mountain moving with you, one block at a time, toward its final, glorious resting place. The smell of damp earth is heavy tonight, a thick, cool scent that clings to your skin and settles in the deep creases of your palms. You stand at the edge of the great excavation, your feet sinking slightly into the soft, dark silt that has been turned over by thousands of shovels. Before the first stone of the central sanctuary could ever be laid, you had to define the boundaries of the world. To build a mountain that touches the heavens, you first had to invite the ocean to cradle its base. You look out over the vast, rectangular void that your workers have carved into the skin of the earth. This moat is not merely a defensive barrier or a source of irrigation. It is the cosmic ocean of Hindu cosmology, the primordial waters from which all life emerged. It is 200 meters wide, a shimmering band of silver under the rising moon, stretching for more than 5 kilometers in a perfect unbroken circuit. The scale of it makes your chest feel tight with a quiet, humble sort of pride. You remember the months of measuring, the wooden stakes driven into the soil with rhythmic thuds, the long lines of twine pulled taut to ensure that every angle was true, every side a perfect reflection of the cardinal directions. As you walk along the embankment, the mud squelches between your toes, cool and slick. Your back aches with a dull, familiar throb, a reminder of the years spent leaning over parchment and treading across uneven ground. But the physical labor of the earth is what grounds the spirit. You watch the water as it begins to fill the trench, redirected from the local rivers through a complex network of canals. It moves slowly, a dark, liquid tongue licking at the fresh-cut banks. But the water is more than a symbol. It is a sentinel. You know a secret that the casual observer might never guess. The ground here in this lush floodplain is temperamental. It breathes with the seasons, swelling during the heavy monsoons and shrinking, cracking and gasping during the long months of drought. If you were to simply pile millions of tons of sandstone upon this shifting soil, the weight would cause the temple to groan, to tilt, and eventually to disappear back into the mud from which it was born. To prevent this, you have engineered a hidden foundation, a silent architecture beneath the surface. You spent weeks overseeing the layering of the earth. First, a deep bed of sand, packed tight and leveled with obsessive care. Then, layers of tough, fibrous clay. You recall the feeling of that clay in your hands, dense, sticky, and resilient. By alternating these materials, you have created a giant earthen sponge. The moat plays the most vital role in this invisible machine. By keeping the moat filled to a constant, precise level, you ensure that the groundwater beneath the temple remains stable. The water in the trench exerts a gentle, persistent pressure, holding the water table under the central island in a state of perfect equilibrium. It is a hydraulic embrace. The sand beneath the temple stays saturated but firm, never drying out enough to collapse and never becoming so sodden that it liquefies. You have essentially floated a mountain of stone upon a sea of sand, held in place by the very water that surrounds it. You stop at the edge of the western causeway, where the great bridge of sandstone begins its journey across the water. The stones under your feet are still warm from the day's sun, though the air is cooling rapidly. You reach down to touch the surface of a block, feeling the grit of the sand and the subtle grain of the rock. This bridge is the transition. To cross it is to leave the world of men, of noise and of taxes, and to enter the realm of the eternal. As you walk toward the center of the bridge, the sound of the jungle begins to fade, replaced by the rhythmic lap of water against the stone pylons. The air feels different here, cleaner, perhaps, or simply weighted with the significance of the space. You think of the pilgrims who will one day walk this same path. They will see their own reflections in the still water of the moat, a brief moment of self-contemplation before they lift their eyes to the towering gopuras ahead. The water acts as a mirror, doubling the majesty of the stone. In the quiet of the evening, the line between the sky and the earth blurs. The stars begin to prick through the velvet blue of the dusk, and you see them reflected in the moat, so that it feels as if you are walking across a causeway suspended in the middle of the heavens. It is a deliberate illusion, a way of preparing the mind for the sacred geometry that lies ahead. You are not just a builder of walls, you are a weaver of atmospheres. Your fingers trace a small carving on the balustrade, a naga, the multi-headed serpent that guards the waters. Its stone scales are smooth under your touch, worn down by the hands of the masons who polished them with river sand. The naga represents the bridge between the human world and the world of the gods, its body stretching across the expanse of the water to tether the sacred island to the mundane shore. You feel a sense of kinship with the serpent. You too are a bridge builder, translating the abstract mathematics of the cosmos into the tangible reality of earth and water. The humidity settles over you like a soft, damp cloak. You can hear the distant, melodic clink of a lone stonecutter finishing a late task, the sound carrying clearly over the water. It is a lonely, peaceful sound. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the breath of the land. You can almost feel the massive weight of the temple pressing down, and the counter-pressure of the water pushing back, a silent, eternal dialogue of forces. As the years pass, the jungle will try to reclaim this place. Vines will seek out the smallest cracks, and the roots of the banyan trees will pry at the joints of the stone. But as long as the water remains in the moat, the foundation will hold. The mountain will stay level. The gods will have their stable home. You turn back toward the shore, your footsteps echoing softly on the sandstone. The transition from the sacred island back to the mud of the construction site is always a bit jarring, a return to the world of logistics and labor. There are more stones to move tomorrow, more layers of clay to inspect, and more canals to clear of debris. But for now, the work is quiet. The ocean you have built is calm. The reflection of the half-finished towers shivers in a light breeze, the ripples spreading outward in concentric circles until they touch the far bank. You watch them dissipate, marveling at how something as fluid and yielding as water can be the very thing that gives the heaviest stone its permanence. You breathe in the scent of the lotus flowers that have begun to take root in the shallows, a sweet, floral note over the base of wet earth. You find a small wooden bench near the water's edge and sit, letting the exhaustion of the day finally settle into your bones. Your muscles feel heavy, a pleasant weariness that speaks of progress. The stars are fully out now, thousands of them mirrored in the dark expanse of the moat. You realize that you have not just built a temple, you have captured a piece of the sky and pinned it to the earth with water. In the stillness, you think of the generations to come who will stand where you are standing. They will not see the thousands of men with shovels, or the muddy foundations, or the clever engineering of the sand and clay. They will only see the beauty. They will see a mountain rising from the sea, a perfect, unshakable monument to the divine. And you are content to let the labor remain hidden as long as the vision remains clear. The water continues its slow, rhythmic pulse against the bank, a heartbeat for the temple. You lean back, resting your head against the cool wood of the bench, and watch the moon climb higher. The world is at peace, held in the balance of your design, and as the cool night air brushes against your face, you feel the profound stability of the earth beneath you, anchored by the ocean you have made. The smell of damp earth and iron fills your lungs as you step away from the water's edge, moving back toward the skeletal frame of the rising terrace. It is a heavy, metallic scent, the perfume of the laterite clay that serves as the temple's bone and marrow. You feel the grit of it beneath your fingernails, a persistent reminder of the thousands of blocks that have already been hauled from the earth to form this artificial mountain. In the moonlight, the laterite looks dark and bruised, a porous, honeycombed stone that lacks the elegance of the surface finish, but carries the entire weight of the king's ambition. You walk toward a stack of these blocks, reaching out to rest your palm against the rough, pitted surface. It is cool now, but during the heat of the day, these stones seem to hold the sun's fire long after the shadows have stretched across the site. This is the hidden strength of Angkor. While the world will eventually see only the silver-grey shimmer of sandstone, you know that the heart of the temple is built from this red, iron-rich soil. It is a humble material, born of the mud and the monsoon, yet it is nearly indestructible once it has been cut from the ground and allowed to harden in the open air. You find a certain comfort in its honesty. It does not need to be beautiful, for its only purpose is to endure. The transition from the soft, waterlogged earth to this solid foundation is a slow, rhythmic labor that dictates the pace of your life. You watch the workers in your mind's eye, even now as the site sits silent. You see the way they swing the heavy iron picks, the rhythmic thud echoing through the forest as they isolate a block of laterite from the quarry floor. There is a specific sound when the stone finally yields, a wet, sucking snap, as the block is pried from its prehistoric bed. It is a sound of birth, the beginning of a journey that will end in the heavens. As you walk among the rising walls of the inner core, you notice the absence of mortar. There is no lime, no bitumen, no sticky resin to hold these massive weights together. Instead, the stability of the mountain depends entirely on the precision of the fit and the relentless pull of gravity. You run your hand along a seam where two laterite blocks meet. Even here, in the internal structure that will never be seen by a pilgrim's eye, the joinery is tight. You have trained your foreman to be obsessive, to understand that a single millimeter of error at the base will manifest as a leaning tower at the summit. The process is grueling, a slow dance of friction and patience. You recall the sound of the rubbing, the abrasive, grinding groan of stone sliding against stone. To achieve such a perfect fit, the labourers must suspend a block by heavy ropes and slide it back and forth, thousands of times, against the block beneath it. They use water and sand as an abrasive, grinding the surfaces down until they are perfectly flat, perfectly flush. It is a task that wears down the body and the spirit, yet it creates a bond so tight that the air itself is squeezed out from between the stones. You have seen blocks so perfectly joined that they seem to have grown back together, becoming a single, monolithic entity. This is the secret of the temple's longevity. It is not a pile of stones, but a woven tapestry of minerals locked in a permanent embrace. The ache in your lower back flares as you step over a pile of rubble, a reminder of the years spent leaning over drafting boards and climbing bamboo scaffolding. You find a seat on a discarded fragment of stone and look up at the transition point, where the rough laterite core meets the first layers of the sandstone skin. It is like watching a rough-hewn giant slowly put on a suit of silk. The sandstone is different, softer to the touch, finer in grain, and capable of holding the delicate lines of a goddess's smile or the intricate swirl of a lotus petal. But the sandstone is thin, a mere veneer compared to the massive bulk of the laterite behind it. You reflect on the duality of your creation. The laterite is the truth of the earth, the heavy, sweating reality of the labor, while the sandstone is the dream, the celestial vision that will capture the light of the rising sun. One cannot exist without the other. Without the porous, breathing core of laterite, the sandstone would crack under its own weight or be shifted by the heaving of the wet soil. The laterite absorbs the moisture of the jungle, acting as a giant sponge that regulates the temple's internal temperature and pressure. It is a living thing, pulsing with the seasons. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the temple settling. There are tiny creaks and groans, the sound of thousands of tons of stone finding their final resting place. You think of the men who spent their entire lives rubbing these stones together, their hands calloused and stained red by the iron dust. You feel a deep kinship with them. While you provide the geometry and the vision, they provide the friction. Their sweat is the only mortar you have ever needed. You imagine the millions of strokes it took to flatten these surfaces, a collective effort of human will that defies the transience of life. A man may live 60 years, but a stone rubbed flat will stand for 1,000. The moon passes behind a thin veil of cloud, softening the shadows of the inner galleries. You stand up, your joints stiff from the evening chill, and begin to walk toward the outer perimeter. The transition from the inner core to the exterior is where your greatest challenges lie. This is where the rough geometry of the structural walls must align perfectly with the refined carvings of the facade. You stop at a corner where the sandstone has just begun to be laid. Here, the blocks are larger, heavier, brought down from the holy mountains of Kulen on rafts through the network of canals you helped design. You touch the sandstone, and the sensation is entirely different. It is smooth, almost buttery, under your fingertips. It holds the moonlight with a pale, ghostly glow. You can see the faint marks of the chisels, the preliminary lines where the master carvers will eventually tell the stories of churning oceans and celestial battles. But for now, it is blank. A vast canvas of grey siltstone waiting for its soul. You think of how the two stones work in harmony, the laterite providing the strength to reach for the clouds, and the sandstone providing the language to speak to the gods. As you walk, you find yourself tracing the edge of a joint so fine it is almost invisible. You remember the day this particular block was set. It took 40 men and a team of elephants to hoist it into position, and another 3 days of rubbing to ensure it sat perfectly level. You had stood right here, watching the water and grit flow out from the seam, listening to the rhythmic chanting of the workers as they pushed and pulled. The exhaustion on their faces was a reflection of your own, yet when the block finally settled and the gap vanished into a single hairline shadow, a profound silence had fallen over the crew. They knew, as you knew, that they had achieved something that verged on the miraculous. The forest beyond the temple walls hums with the sound of insects, a constant, vibrating backdrop to your thoughts. You feel the weight of the mountain you are building, not as a burden, but as an anchor. It tethers you to this land, to this king, and to this moment in time. The Laterite core is rising, block by block, breath by breath, and with every stone that is rubbed clean and set in place, the vision becomes more solid, more undeniable. You look back one last time at the dark, pitted walls of the inner sanctum, feeling a strange affection for their ugliness. They are the warriors of the structure, the silent, hidden guardians who will hold up the heavens long after your name has been forgotten by the wind. And as you turn toward your quarters, the smell of wood smoke and damp stone following you, you are satisfied. The foundation is deep, the core is strong, and the mountain is beginning to breathe. The sound of 1,000 tiny hammers is the heartbeat of the mountain. It is a rhythmic, metallic chatter that begins just as the morning mist starts to lift from the moat, a sound so constant and pervasive that it eventually fades into the background of your consciousness, becoming as natural as the sound of your own breathing. You walk along the outer galleries now, your sandals clicking softly against the paving stones that have already been polished smooth by the passage of thousands of feet. The air here is different than it was in the dark, damp belly of the inner sanctum. It is cooler, caught in the draughty corridors of the sandstone cloisters, and it carries the fine grey dust of 1,000 carvings. This dust settles on your skin, a pale powder that turns the dark hair on your arms white by midday, marking you as a man of the mountain. You stop to watch a group of young apprentices, boys no older than 12 or 13, who are seated cross-legged on the floor. They are the lowest rung of the great hierarchy of the guilds, the hands that do the heavy, unglamorous labour of preparation. You watch as they take heavy blocks of abrasive stone and rub them back and forth against the wall, smoothing away the rough marks of the quarry chisels. Their movements are slow and hypnotic, a back-and-forth swaying that mimics the motion of the tide. They do not talk, they simply work, their small shoulders tensing and relaxing in a steady rhythm. It will take them months, perhaps years, before the master of the guild allows them to hold a fine iron stylus. For now their contribution is the creation of a perfect canvas, a wall so smooth it feels like silk beneath your fingertips, cold and inviting. As you move further down the gallery, the work becomes more complex. You pass the outline men, the draftsmen who use charcoal and red ochre to sketch the first whispers of the gods onto the stone. You see the faint reddish lines of a battle scene from the Ramayana, the limbs of monkeys and demons intertwined in a chaotic dance that has not yet been given depth. It is a strange liminal state for the temple to be in, half-dreamed and half-realized. You pause to adjust the drape of your linen sarong, feeling the slight ache in your lower back from yesterday's climb. You find yourself standing before a section of the wall where the stone has begun to bloom. Here the master sculptors are at work, and the atmosphere is one of intense, quiet concentration. These are the men you know best, the veterans of the guild who have spent their entire lives translating the king's visions into three-dimensional reality. They sit on low wooden scaffolding, their faces inches from the sandstone. You watch a master carver named Kem work on the face of a Devata. He uses a small mallet made of heavy hardwood and a series of iron chisels, some no thicker than a needle. With a precision that seems almost supernatural, he taps the tool, and a tiny flake of stone falls away, revealing the curve of an eyelid, the swell of a lip, the intricate pattern of a jeweled earring. There is no room for error here. To strike too hard is to chip a goddess's nose. To strike too softly is to leave the stone mute. You feel a deep sense of respect for the stillness of his hands, a stillness that comes from decades of discipline. The gallery is becoming a forest of stone women. There are more than 2,000 of them, the Apsaras and Devatas, the celestial dancers and guardians of the heavens. As you walk, you realize that no two are the same. This was your decree, a challenge issued to the guilds to ensure that the mountain of God was as diverse and vibrant as the world itself. You lean in close to one particularly fine figure, your nose nearly touching the cool stone. You notice the way her hair is braided in a complex, tiered crown decorated with tiny lotus buds that have been carved with such delicacy you can see the individual petals. Her waist is narrow, her hips broad, and her hands are held in a mudra of blessing, the fingers long and tapering. You reach out and trace the curve of her arm. The stone is no longer just stone. It has been imbued with a sense of warmth, a phantom vitality. You think about the daily lives of these carvers, the men who spend their daylight hours in this corridor. They live in small, thatched huts near the edge of the royal city, rising before the sun to eat a simple meal of rice and salted fish before trekking to the site. They are paid in grain, in fine cloth, and in the immense prestige of their calling. They are a community within a community, a lineage of skill passed from father to son. You know that Khem's son is one of the boys you saw earlier, rubbing the walls smooth, waiting for his turn to bring a goddess to life. This continuity brings you a quiet comfort. The temple is not just a building, it is a living tradition, a vessel for the collective soul of the people. The hierarchy of the guild is reflected in the very height of the carvings. The most junior carvers work on the decorative borders near the floor, the repeating patterns of vines and leaves that ground the larger scenes. The masters work at eye level, where the detail must be most perfect, and above them, on the higher reaches of the walls, where the light from the clerestory windows catches the stone, the most senior elders oversee the grand compositions of the heavens. You look up, squinting against the shafts of sunlight that are thick with floating dust motes. Up there the stone seems to glow, the deep shadows of the relief work creating a sense of movement, as if the celestial dancers are swaying in the breeze that whistles through the high arches. You find a quiet spot to sit for a moment, resting your weight against a square pillar. The stone is cool against your spine, a welcome relief from the humidity that is beginning to build as the morning progresses. You close your eyes and listen to the symphony of the gallery. Beyond the tapping of the chisels, you hear the distant calling of water birds from the moat, the low murmur of the priests chanting in a nearby courtyard, and the occasional shout of a foreman directing a team of labourers. It is a busy, industrious piece. You think about the sheer scale of what is being achieved here. Every square inch of these kilometres of walls will eventually be covered in stories. Every surface will be a prayer. As the hours drift by, you notice the way the light changes the character of the carvings. In the direct glare of midday, the reliefs can look flat, their details washed out by the overhead sun. But as the light begins to slant, the shadows lengthen, and the Devatas seem to step out from the walls. Their jewellery catches the light. Their expressions seem to shift from serene to mischievous. You find yourself fascinated by the small details that the carvers have tucked away, a tiny bird perched on a goddess's shoulder, a hidden flower in the fold of a sarong, a slight smile that seems to acknowledge the viewer. These are the personal touches of the artisans, the small rebellions of creativity within the strict iconographic rules of the state. You stand up, stretching your limbs, feeling the familiar stiffness in your joints. You decide to walk toward the end of the gallery, where the work is still in its earliest stages. Here, the walls are still largely blank, marked only by the grid lines used by the architects to ensure perfect symmetry. It is a reminder of how much work remains to be done. You look at the vast expanse of empty sandstone, and you do not feel overwhelmed. Instead, you feel a sense of profound possibility. This is the future of the mountain. Years from now, these empty spaces will be filled with the history of the world, with the wars of gods and the triumphs of kings. The smell of the gallery stays with you as you finally turn to leave. The scent of wet stone, the metallic tang of iron, and the faint, sweet aroma of incense drifting from the inner shrines. Your hands are dusty, and your mind is full of the faces of stone women. You walk slowly, savouring the transition from the cool shade of the cloisters to the warmth of the open courtyard. The mountain is growing, inch by inch, stroke by stroke. The guilds will return tomorrow, and the day after that, and for decades to come, until the last lotus bud is carved, and the last goddess is awakened. You are merely one part of this great unfolding, a witness to the slow, steady transformation of the earth into the divine. And as you walk, the rhythm of the hammers follows you, a heartbeat that echoes in the very marrow of your bones. The scent of damp silt and crushed jasmine lingers in the air as you step from the blinding glare of the courtyard into the cool indigo shadows of the eastern gallery. Your bare feet find a familiar rhythm on the sandstone floor, the stone worn smooth and cool by the passage of countless thousands who have walked this path before you. Here, the air feels heavier, thick with the silence of centuries yet to come, and the humidity of the surrounding jungle is held at bay by the massive stone eaves. You pause for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the dim, filtered light that spills through the balustraded windows, casting long, rhythmic bars of gold across the floor. Before you, stretching out into the distance like a frozen river of stone, is the masterwork of the third enclosure. It is a sight that never fails to steady your breathing, a vast expanse of bas-relief that seems to pulse with a life of its own. This is the churning of the ocean of milk. You reach out a hand, your fingers hovering just an inch from the surface, tracing the invisible energy that radiates from the wall. The stone is not merely carved, it is transformed. For nearly 50 meters, a single, unbroken narrative unfolds, a feat of artistic and technical precision that has occupied the finest minds of the kingdom for a generation. You think of the master masons who stood where you stand now, debating the placement of every limb and the tension of every chord, knowing that a single misplaced stroke of the chisel could shatter the harmony of the entire cosmic dance. You begin to walk slowly alongside the relief, your shoulder almost brushing the wall. To your left, a phalanx of 92 demons, the Asuras, strain with primal intensity. Their faces are contorted with effort, their many heads and arms overlapping in a complex tapestry of muscle and grit. You can almost feel the grit of the sand beneath their feet and the salt spray of the primordial sea on their skin. They are gripping the body of the great serpent, Vasuki, using the serpent as a colossal rope to pull against their eternal rivals. The detail is staggering. You notice the way the scales of the serpent are rendered with such fine precision that they seem to shimmer in the shifting light, and the way the demons' jewelry, their heavy earrings and ornate armbands, hangs heavy with the weight of their exertion. On the opposite side, 88 gods, the Devas, pull in the other direction. Their expressions are calmer, more resolute, reflecting a divine certainty that balances the raw fury of the demons. Between them stands the great mountain Mandara, serving as the pivot for this celestial tug-of-war. You look closely at the center of the composition, where the god Vishnu appears in his human form to direct the labor, while beneath the mountain he takes the form of the giant tortoise, Kurma, providing the stable foundation upon which the entire universe rests. The technical challenge of maintaining the scale and proportion across such a vast distance is something you contemplate often. How did they ensure that the mountain remained perfectly centered? How did they manage the transition of the serpent's body so that it flows seamlessly from one end of the gallery to the other? It required a mastery of geometry and a patience that transcends the human lifespan. As you walk, the scene begins to churn in your imagination. The relief depicts the ocean itself as a roiling mass of life. Beneath the feet of the gods and demons, the waters are crowded with fish, crocodiles, and sea monsters, all being torn asunder by the violence of the churning. You see them depicted with a startling realism, creatures of the deep snapping and twisting as the water turns to froth. It is a reminder that creation is often a violent process, a stirring of the depths that requires both light and dark, both the divine and the demonic, to bring forth the treasures of existence. The goal of this titanic struggle, as the stories tell, is the recovery of the Amrita, the nectar of immortality. As the ocean is churned for 1,000 years, various wonders begin to emerge from the foam. You stop to admire the celestial dancers, the apsaras, who seem to flutter above the main action like butterflies. There are hundreds of them, each one unique, their bodies swaying in a silent music that only the soul can hear. They represent the joy and beauty that arise when the universe is in balance. You feel a soft ache in your lower back from the long day's walk, but looking at these stone goddesses, frozen in eternal grace, makes the physical burden feel lighter. They are the breath of the temple, the lightness that counteracts the heavy stone. This relief is more than just a story from the ancient texts. It is a mirror of the kingdom itself. You understand that in the mind of the king, Suryavarman, he is the one holding the center. Just as Vishnu stabilizes the mountain, the king stabilizes the realm. By commissioning this work, he is not just decorating a wall, he is performing a ritual in stone. He is ensuring that the seasons will turn, that the rains will fall on the rice paddies, and that the nectar of prosperity will continue to flow into the mouths of his people. The cosmic balance depicted here is the same balance you strive for in your own work as an architect, the harmony between the horizontal and the vertical, between the weight of the earth and the aspiration of the sky. The shadows in the gallery are lengthening now, and the figures on the wall seem to move in the flickering light. The serpent Vasuki appears to pulse, his long body undulating as the gods and demons pull. You find yourself slowing your pace even further, captivated by the sheer rhythm of the carving. It is like a heartbeat set in sandstone. Every few feet, a new detail catches your eye, the way a demon's toes dig into the ground, or the intricate pattern on a god's sarong. The carvers did not rush. They worked with the steady, rhythmic breath of meditators, knowing that they were carving not for their own time, but for eternity. As you reach the end of the panel, the churning reaches its climax. The nectar is found, the balance is restored, and the world is made whole once again. You stand at the corner of the gallery for a long moment, looking back down the long corridor of stone. The perspective makes the figures blend into a single shimmering line of energy. You feel a deep sense of peace here, in the cool silence of the enclosure. The noise of the construction outside, the shouting of the elephant drivers, the clatter of the scaffolding, the constant ring of metal on stone, feels like a distant memory. Here, in the presence of the churning ocean, time seems to stretch and thin until the past and the future are nothing more than ripples on the surface of the milk. You adjust the weight of your tools, feeling the familiar pressure of the leather strap against your shoulder. The day is fading, and soon the temple will be left to the moonlight and the spirits of the ancestors. But the work you have seen today, the stories carved into the very bones of the mountain, will remain. They are the anchors of the world. As you turn to leave the gallery, you take one last look at the central figure of Vishnu, standing serene amidst the chaos of the churning. You realize that your role, too, is a form of churning, taking the raw materials of the earth, the mud and the stone and the timber, and through labor and vision, turning them into something divine. The transition back into the open air is gentle. The heat has broken, replaced by a soft, cooling breeze that carries the scent of wood smoke from the nearby villages. You walk toward the outer gates, your footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. The rhythm of the churning of the ocean of milk stays with you, a steady pulsing beat in the back of your mind. It is the sound of the universe breathing, the sound of the gods and demons working in tandem to create the world anew every single day. And as you head toward your rest, you carry that balance within you, a quiet spark of immortality found in the heart of the stone. The grit of sandstone dust has settled into the fine lines of your palms, a greyish powder that turns to a thin, slick mud when you wipe your brow in the humid air. You stand at the base of the inner terrace, looking upward until your neck aches, tracing the silhouette of the 5 great towers against the darkening violet of the sky. This is the Quincunx, the sacred arrangement of 4 peripheral peaks surrounding the one true center. To the world outside these walls, they are simply stone and shadow, but to you they are the literal manifestation of Mount Meru, the golden mountain that stands at the center of the universe, supporting the heavens themselves. Your eyes follow the tapering curves of the central sanctuary, the tallest of the 5, which seems to pull the very gravity of the earth upward toward its peak. It is a heavy, silent weight that you feel in your own bones. You know the secrets of its interior, the way the stones are stacked not with the easy grace of a true arch, but with the stubborn, rhythmic persistence of the corbel. You have spent years overseeing the placement of these layers, each stone jutting just a fraction of an inch further inward than the one beneath it, creeping toward the center until the 2 sides finally meet at the summit. It is a technique of immense pressure and precarious balance, a way of building that requires the stone to hold its own breath, pushing inward and downward with a force that would crush a lesser design. As you walk across the courtyard, the soles of your feet find the cool, flat surfaces of the paving stones, yet you are acutely aware of what lies directly beneath them. Your mind drifts to the day the foundation was consecrated, a memory of silence and ceremony that feels as heavy as the stone itself. Deep under the floor of the central sanctuary, tucked into the dark earth before the first blocks were even laid, you placed the sacred deposits. You can still feel the ghost of that weight in your hands. The cool, smooth surface of gold leaves inscribed with holy verses and the sharp, cold flicker of unpolished gemstones. Rubies and sapphires, hidden forever from the light of the sun, acting as a spiritual battery for the temple. They are the seeds from which this stone mountain grew, a hidden treasury of light that ensures the god remains tethered to this spot, even when the monsoon rains turn the world to a blur of grey and green. The structural pressure of the central tower is a living thing to you. You understand that the height of the spire is limited by the very nature of the corbelled arch. It cannot soar with the hollow lightness of the western vaults you have heard travellers speak of. Instead, it must be solid, massive, and dense. The interior chambers are narrow and tall, like stone chimneys reaching for the stars, because the weight of the mountain above them demands thick, uncompromising walls. You feel that same density in your own chest as you contemplate the sheer tonnage of sandstone pressing down toward the earth. It is a miracle of friction and gravity. Thousands of tons of rock held together, not by mortar, but by the perfect, flat marriage of stone on stone, ground down until they fit with the precision of a heartbeat. You pause by one of the smaller corner towers, resting your hand against the carved relief of a celestial dancer, The stone is still warm from the day's heat, radiating a gentle fever that matches the slow throb in your shoulders. These 4 outer towers are the guardians of the cardinal directions, the lesser peaks that frame the majesty of the center. In the Quincunx, everything is about relationship. The way the smaller spires bow toward the greater one, creating a geometric harmony that reflects the order of the cosmos. If one were to fail, the spiritual balance of the entire complex would tilt. But they do not fail. They stand with a stoic, silent endurance, their weight distributed through the stepped terraces you helped design, spreading the burden of the heavens across the wide, steady shoulders of the earth. The air grows stiller as the evening deepens, and the scent of damp earth rises from the moats, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of the stone. You think of the true arch, a concept that has reached your ears in fragments of stories from distant lands. An arch that uses a keystone to distribute weight in a circle. You find the idea fascinating, yet there is something more honest to you about the corbel. It is a ladder of stone, a literal stepping upward that mirrors the way a man climbs a mountain. It is laborious and slow, and it limits the space you can create inside, but it results in a structure that feels as permanent as the planet itself. The narrowness of the inner sanctum only adds to its power. It is a womb of stone, dark and compressed, where the presence of the divine is felt in the very density of the air. Underneath your feet, the gold and the gemstones remain in their eternal dark, buried deep below the heavy pedestal where the statue of the god resides. You imagine them down there, the gold leaves shimmering in the absolute blackness, the gems holding the memory of the light they once saw. They are the soul of the engineering, the hidden logic that makes the physical weight of the towers bearable. Without that sacred foundation, the temple would be nothing but a pile of rocks. With it, it is a living bridge between the mud of the Mekong and the high, cold reaches of the celestial peaks. As you turn to leave the inner enclosure, your shadow stretches long and thin across the gallery floor, disappearing into the darkness of the colonnades. The towers behind you seem to grow taller in the twilight, their jagged profiles mimicking the distant hills. You feel a quiet satisfaction in the ache of your muscles and the stiffness of your joints. The engineering of the Quincunx is not just a matter of mathematics or masonry. It is an act of devotion, a way of pinning the divine to the earth with such immense weight that it can never be moved. You walk slowly, savoring the cool breeze that finally begins to stir the heavy air, knowing that as long as those 5 towers pierce the sky, the center of the world is exactly where it belongs. The pressure of the stone, the hidden gold in the earth, and the rhythm of the rising spires all hum together in a low, resonant frequency, a song of stability that lulls the city, and you into a deep and well-earned rest. The soles of your feet find a different kind of silence here, a texture of stone that has been polished not by the elements, but by the soft, rhythmic passage of bare feet over decades. You have reached the Bakan, the highest level of the temple, the innermost sanctum, where the air feels heavier, yet somehow more pure. Only the king, the high priests, and a few chosen architects like yourself are permitted to cross this threshold. As you step into the central gallery, the transition from the blinding tropical glare of the outer courtyards to this deep, charcoal-colored shade is like a cool hand pressed against a fevered brow. The heat of the Cambodian afternoon remains outside, held back by walls of sandstone so thick they seem to breathe out the chill of a subterranean cave. You feel the tension in your shoulders begin to dissolve, the long hours of overseeing the heavy lifting and the precision carving fading into a distant memory as the stillness of the sanctuary takes hold of you. The corridors here are narrow, designed to guide your movement in a single, deliberate line. As you walk, your shoulders occasionally brush against the cool stone, and you notice how the light behaves differently in this elevated world. It does not flood the space. Rather, it trickles in through high, slender windows, casting long, thin bars of gold across the floor. These shafts of light are filled with dancing motes of dust, turning the very air into something visible and precious. You watch as a shadow stretches out before you, merging with the darkness of the corners where the incense smoke gathers in stagnant, fragrant pools. The interplay of light and shadow is not accidental. You and your fellow builders planned this carefully, ensuring that the transition from the world of men to the world of the gods was marked by a gradual surrendering of sight. In this dimness, your other senses begin to sharpen. You smell the faint, metallic tang of the stone, the earthy scent of rainwater trapped in the cisterns below, and the sweet, heavy perfume of jasmine garlands draped over the pedestals. As you venture deeper toward the very heart of the Bacan, the silence begins to vibrate. You pause, standing perfectly still, and you realize that even the sound of your own breath is being transformed by the geometry of the room. The acoustics of these stone chambers are a marvel of your own design, though they still feel like a gift from the divine. When a priest chants in the inner chamber, the sound does not simply travel, it expands. It bounces off the vaulted ceilings and the meticulously joined blocks of sandstone, creating a low, resonant hum that seems to vibrate within your own chest. You hum a single soft note, testing the air, and you feel the stone catch it, hold it, and return it to you as a gentle shimmer of sound. It is as if the temple itself is alive, a giant limestone instrument tuned to the frequency of the heavens. In these chambers, a whisper carries the weight of a shout, and a prayer becomes a physical force that wraps around you like a heavy silken shroud. Finally, you stand before the central cella, the most sacred point in the entire Khmer Empire. Here, in the absolute center of the 5 towers, dwells the great statue of Vishnu. He is carved from a single massive block of dark stone, polished until he glows with a soft inner light. In the gloom of the sanctuary, his 4 arms reach out toward the cardinal directions, holding the sphere of the earth, the conch shell, the lotus, and the mace. You look up at his face and find that the expression is one of profound, eternal peace. This is not just a statue to you. It is the anchor of the world. You remember the day the image was consecrated, the way the priests poured lustral water over the stone, and how you felt a sudden, inexplicable shift in the atmosphere, as if the mountain of God had finally settled into its true purpose. The weight of the empire, the success of the harvest, and the very flow of the great lake all seem to emanate from this silent stone figure. You feel small in his presence, yet strangely vital, a necessary part of a cosmic machine that you helped to assemble. You reach out a hand, your fingers trembling slightly, and touch the base of the pedestal. The stone is smooth, worn down by the offerings of those who came before you. You think of the thousands of laborers who hauled these blocks from the Kulen mountains, the artists who spent years perfecting the curve of a lip or the fold of a robe, and the mathematicians who calculated the alignment of this very spot with the stars above. All of that effort, all of that human sweat and ingenuity has culminated in this quiet, dark room. The physical ache in your lower back, the legacy of years spent leaning over drafting tables and climbing scaffolding, feels like a small price to pay for this moment of connection. You are standing at the axis of the universe, where the horizontal plane of the earth meets the vertical reach of the sky. The shadows deepen as the sun moves further west, and the narrow corridors of the Bacan begin to swallow the last of the golden light. You find a spot against the wall and slide down until you are sitting on the floor, your legs stretched out across the cool sandstone. There is no need for words here, and no need for the frantic pace of the construction site. You listen to the distant, muffled sounds of the city far below, the faint lowing of cattle, the call of a merchant, the rustle of the wind in the forest canopy, but they feel like echoes from another life. Here, within the heart of the sanctuary, time seems to slow to a crawl. The rhythmic chanting of a priest in a nearby gallery begins, a low melodic drone that anchors your thoughts and pulls you toward a state of deep meditation. The sound rises and falls like the tide, filling the stone lungs of the temple with a breath that is older than the empire itself. As you sit in the gathering dark, you realize that the temple is not just a house for the god, but a map of the human soul. The long outer galleries represent the journey through life, filled with stories and struggles, while this inner sanctum is the quiet center we all seek. You close your eyes, letting the cool air of the Bakan wash over your face, and you feel the immense weight of the stone towers above you. They are not heavy in a way that threatens, they are heavy in a way that protects. They are a shield against the chaos of the world, a solid, unmoving presence in a life that is often fleeting and uncertain. You breathe in the scent of the dark stone and the fading incense, and you feel a profound sense of completion. The work is done, the God is home, and for this moment you are allowed to simply exist within the heart of your creation. The darkness is now almost complete, save for the faint, silvery glow of the moon beginning to rise, casting a new kind of light through the high windows. This light is pale and ghostly, turning the corridors into a dreamscape of grey and silver. You watch the patterns shift on the floor, mesmerized by the slow celestial clockwork. Your mind wanders to the generations who will come after you, the pilgrims who will climb these stairs, and the kings who will seek counsel in this very spot. You hope they will feel what you feel now, the sense of being held by something vast and benevolent. The ache in your limbs has softened into a dull, pleasant thrum, a reminder of a life spent in service to a vision. As the chanting fades into a low hum, you let your head rest against the stone, the cold surface a soothing balm to your tired mind. The Bakan is a place of transition, a bridge between the seen and the unseen. As you drift in the space between wakefulness and sleep, the lines between the stone and your own body seem to blur. You are the architect, yes, but you are also a part of the temple itself, a single grain of sand in the great mountain of God. The silence here is not empty. It is full of the intentions, the prayers, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath the foundation, a slow, steady heartbeat that matches your own. As the night deepens, you surrender to the stillness, knowing that the sanctuary will hold you just as it holds the God in its eternal stone embrace. The world outside may change, the jungle may grow, and the seasons may turn. But here, in the heart of the Bakan, there is only the peace of the mountain, the song of the stone, and the long, slow breathe of the divine. The scent of wood smoke drifts toward you on a low, humid breeze, carrying with it the smell of roasting fish and fermented paste. It is a sharp contrast to the sterile, cool scent of the sandstone galleries you have just left behind. As you step away from the monumental silence of the Bakan, the world begins to soften. You descend the steep stairs, feeling the familiar protest in your knees, a reminder of the many years spent climbing these artificial mountains. Your bare feet leave the cold, unyielding stone of the gods and meet the warm, yielding earth of the living city. Here, the grand ambition of eternity gives way to the gentle, rhythmic fragility of the everyday. You walk through the enclosure, passing the high stone walls that serve as the boundary between the celestial and the terrestrial. Beyond these gates, the landscape transforms. The world of the Khmer is not a city of stone, but a city of wood, bamboo, and thatch, a sprawling green metropolis that breathes with the seasons. You look out over a sea of peaked roofs, thousands upon thousands of them, woven from palm fronds and grass, tucked neatly into the shade of fruit trees. It is a vast organic carpet that stretches toward the horizon, far beyond the reach of the temple's shadow. You know that while the temple is built to last 10,000 years, these homes are built to last a single generation, or perhaps only a decade, before the jungle and the rain reclaim them and they are built anew. There is a certain peace in this transience, a balance to the heavy, eternal weight of the stone mountain behind you. As you move deeper into the city, the sounds of life begin to swell. It is the sound of 1,000 wooden pestles striking stone mortars as rice is hushed for the evening meal. It is the playful shout of children chasing a stray dog through the dust, and the low, rhythmic thrum of a silk loom operating beneath a stilted house. You walk along the raised earthen dikes that serve as the city's arteries, looking down at the homes of the common citizens. Every house is raised high on wooden pilings, a necessary defense against the coming monsoons, when the ground will turn to a shallow, shimmering lake. You notice the way the light catches the intricate carvings on the eaves of a wealthy official's home, made of sturdy teak and rosewood, while nearby, a labourer's hut is a simple, honest construction of bamboo and woven mats. The air grows thicker with the activity of the evening market. You navigate through the crowds, feeling the warmth of bodies and the vibrant energy of trade. Here, the builders and the stonecutters come to spend their rations of grain and salt. You see the displays of silver-scaled fish brought in from the Great Lake, still slick and shining, laid out on broad banana leaves. There are piles of green mangoes, heavy clusters of bananas, and the pungent, earthy mounds of shrimp paste that give the city its distinctive aroma. You watch a woman expertly peel a pomelo, the citrus spray misting the air for a brief, fragrant second. This is the engine that drives the construction of Angkor Wat. It is not just stone and engineering, but the calories of the rice paddies and the protein of the Tonle Sap. You feel a deep connection to these people, the farmers and the merchants, whose invisible labour sustains the very hands that carve the bas-reliefs. As you walk, you find yourself tracing the edge of a small canal, one of the hundreds of veins that pulse through the city. You stop for a moment to watch the water flow, dark and steady. This is the true mastery of your people, a secret even more profound than the stacking of stones. You look toward the east and the west, knowing that out there, beyond the houses and the markets, lie the barrets, those massive man-made oceans that hold the lifeblood of the empire. You think of the West Barret, a mirror of water so vast that it seems to hold the entire sky within its banks. It is a feat of hydraulic engineering that humbles even the tallest spire of the temple. By capturing the monsoon rains and storing them through the long, dusty months of the dry season, the Khmer have mastered time itself, ensuring that the rice grows and the people eat, regardless of the whims of the clouds. You feel the dampness of the canal bank beneath your feet, the mud cool and slick between your toes. This water is directed with a precision that mirrors the alignment of the stars. It flows from the great barrays into a complex network of primary and secondary canals, eventually trickling into the square family ponds that sit beside every home. You watch a young boy dip a ceramic jar into the water, the ripples spreading out in perfect, concentric circles. It occurs to you that the city is a living reflection of the temple's geometry. Just as the temple is a model of the Hindu cosmos, the city is a model of the landscape, a carefully managed garden where every drop of water is accounted for. The engineering of the earth is the foundation for the architecture of the spirit. Further along the path, you reach the perimeter of the royal palace. Unlike the temples, the king's own residence is made of wood, for only the gods are permitted to dwell in stone. You look at the high walls made of laterite and the elaborate wooden pavilions that rise above them, their roofs gilded and shimmering in the fading light. Though it is a palace, it feels more alive than the Bacan. You can hear the faint sound of music from within, the delicate clatter of bronze bells and the high, thin wail of a flute. You imagine the king sitting upon his dais, surrounded by the scent of sandalwood and the cooling breeze of peacock feather fans. Even he, the God King, lives within a structure that will eventually rot and return to the soil, a reminder that even the highest among men are part of the cycle of growth and decay. The sun has dipped below the line of the forest now, and the sky is a bruised purple, fading into deep indigo. You find a quiet spot on a wooden bridge overlooking a junction of two canals. The water reflects the last of the light, appearing like a ribbon of hammered silver laid across the dark earth. You feel the ache in your back begin to settle into a dull, familiar throb, the price of a day spent overseeing the placement of heavy lintels. But as you look around at the flickering oil lamps beginning to appear in the windows of the houses, a sense of profound satisfaction washes over you. The temple is the heart, but this city is the body. The stone mountain would be nothing without the wooden city that surrounds it, providing the hands, the food, and the life that give the stone its meaning. You think of the thousands of men who sleep tonight in those thatch-roofed houses, their muscles sore, their minds perhaps dreaming of the finished galleries. You think of the women who have spent the day weaving the cloth that will wrap the statues of the Devatas. Everything is interconnected. The water in the barais, the rice in the fields, the chisel in the hand, and the prayer in the heart. The humidity of the evening wraps around you like a heavy, warm blanket. You listen to the cicadas beginning their nightly chorus, a wall of sound that rises from the surrounding jungle. It is a wild, untamed noise that contrasts with the ordered silence of the temple precinct. Out there the forest is waiting, patient and powerful. But here, within the city of Angkor, man has carved out a space of perfect harmony. You take a long, slow breath, tasting the damp earth and the distant wood smoke, feeling the pulse of the city slowing down as it prepares for rest. The mountain of God may be the crown, but the city of wood and thatch is the soil from which it grows, and tonight both are at peace. The smell of damp stone is different in the hours before the dawn. It is a heavy mineral scent, a mixture of the sandstone's ancient breath and the dew that has settled into the intricate carvings of the dancing apsaras. You find yourself standing at the very foot of the western causeway, the long bridge of stone that stretches across the glassy surface of the moat. Your feet are bare against the blocks, and you can feel the residual warmth of yesterday's sun still humming deep within the rock, though the air around your shoulders is thin and cool. This is the morning you have spent years preparing for, the moment when the mathematics of the heavens must finally descend to meet the geometry of the earth. You walk slowly, the rhythmic slap of your soles against the stone echoing softly in the pre-dawn stillness. There is no wind. The water of the moat is a perfect mirror, reflecting the indigo sky and the silhouettes of the 5 great towers that rise ahead of you like the petals of a stone lotus. You feel a familiar ache in the small of your back, the legacy of 1,000 hours spent leaning over drafting tables and squinting at the horizon. But today, that ache feels like a badge of honor. You are not merely an architect this morning. You are a witness to a celestial appointment. As you reach the center of the causeway, you stop and look toward the highest peak, the central sanctuary where the god resides. In your mind, you see the invisible lines you drew so long ago, lines that connect the position of the stars to the placement of every pillar and lintel. You know that the universe is not a chaotic place, but a vast, ticking mechanism of light and shadow, and you have built this temple to be its heart. For years, you watched the way the shadows moved across the forest floor, tracking the sun's journey as it drifted north and then south again. You calculated the exact angle of the earth's tilt, using nothing but a weighted string, a bowl of water, and the patient observation of a lifetime. The light begins to change, shifting from a deep violet to a soft bruised gold. You can feel the anticipation humming in your chest, a quiet vibration that matches the stillness of the temple walls. This is the spring equinox, the day of perfect balance, when the hours of light and the hours of darkness are held in an equal hand. It is the hinge upon which the year turns, and you have designed Angkor Wat to be the needle of the world's compass. You watch the silhouetted tip of the central tower, the Bacan, and you wait for the sun to make its claim. Slowly, so slowly that you can barely perceive the movement, a sliver of brilliant, white gold light appears. It does not rise to the left of the tower, nor to the right. It emerges precisely at the very apex, as if the stone itself were giving birth to a star. You hold your breath, your hands resting at your sides, feeling the sudden warmth on your face. This is the solar alignment you labored to achieve. To any other observer, it is a beautiful sight, but to you, it is a confirmation of truth. It means that your measurements were correct to the fraction of a finger's width. It means that the temple is perfectly oriented to the cardinal directions, a stone anchor for the spinning world. The sun continues its ascent, climbing the invisible ladder of the sky until it sits like a crown upon the central spire. The light pours down the tiered levels of the temple, washing over the galleries and the courtyards, turning the grey sandstone into a glowing, golden monument. You watch the shadow of the western gatehouse as it stretches long and thin across the causeway, pointing directly toward the heart of the sanctuary. At this moment, the entire complex is functioning as a giant living sundial. The shadows are not just absences of light, they are markers of time, telling the farmers when to plant their rice and the priests when to begin their fasts. The temple is the calendar of the Khmer people, written in stone and read in light. You think of the ritual significance of this path. The sun travels from the east to the west, just as you are walking from the west toward the east. By entering the temple on this day, you are moving against the flow of time, walking toward the source of all light and life. You feel the weight of the wool of your robes, heavy with the morning mist, and you realize that you are part of the architecture itself. Your body, your breath, and your movement are all integrated into the grand design. The sun's path across the temple's axis is a bridge between the mortal realm and the divine, a reminder that the king's rule is sanctioned by the very stars. As the sun rises higher, the specific alignment begins to fade, the light spreading out to illuminate the thousands of figures carved into the gallery walls. You walk toward the first enclosure, your hand reaching out to touch the cool surface of a bas-relief. The stone feels different now that the sun has hit it. It feels more alive, as if the heat of the morning is waking up the spirits trapped within the rock. You think of the astronomical knowledge required to make this happen, the understanding of the lunar cycles, the solar solstices, and the way the heavens shift over the decades. It is a knowledge passed down through generations of scholars, a silent language of numbers that you have translated into the most beautiful dialect of stone. The temple is not just a house for a god, it is a map of the cosmos. The moat represents the cosmic ocean, the walls are the mountain ranges that ring the world, and the towers are the peaks of Mount Meru. By aligning the sun with the central tower, you have ensured that for one day every year, the heavens and the earth are one. You feel a profound sense of peace as you stand in the warming light. The stress of the construction, the worry over the shifting soil, the endless debates with the stonecutters, it all falls away. The sun does not lie. The alignment is perfect. You find a quiet spot on a stone step, out of the way of the early pilgrims who are beginning to trickle into the precinct. You sit down, resting your elbows on your knees, and simply watch the play of light. You notice how the shadows of the pillars in the gallery fall at precise intervals, creating a rhythm of dark and light that moves with the passing hours. You could tell the time of day simply by looking at the floor, knowing exactly where the sun sits in its journey without ever looking up. This is the mastery of the Khmer architect, to harness the very movement of the universe and pin it down to a single point in the Cambodian jungle. The wood smoke from the nearby city begins to drift over the walls, mixing with the scent of incense being lit in the inner shrines. The city is waking up, but here, in the shadow of the great towers, there is a lingering sense of the eternal. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the sun's heat on your eyelids, and you imagine the temple hundreds of years from now. You wonder if people will still stand on this causeway and wait for the sun to crest the tower. You wonder if they will understand the math, or if they will simply see the beauty. To you, they are the same thing. The beauty is in the precision. The holiness is in the accuracy. As the morning progresses, the heat begins to build, and the dampness of the night evaporates into a shimmering haze. The stone under you is now quite warm, a comforting presence. You have built a mountain that breathes with the sun, a monument that marks the heartbeat of the world. You take a slow, deep breath, letting the golden light fill your lungs, and you feel the immense weight of the temple as something supportive rather than heavy. You are a small part of this grand alignment, a single point on a map that spans the stars, and for today, that is enough. The sun has found its mark, and the mountain of God is exactly where it needs to be. The scent of incense has changed over the long centuries, shifting from the heavy, musky aroma of ghee and sandalwood burned for Shiva to the lighter, cleaner fragrance of lotus blossoms and forest herbs. You find yourself sitting on the same stone threshold where you once watched the sandstone glow orange in the heat of 1,000 summers. But your robes are different now. They are no longer the intricate, heavy silks of a royal architect, but the simple, saffron-dyed cotton of a seeker. The world around you has quieted. The thundering processions of war elephants and the clatter of bronze chariots have faded into a distant memory, replaced by the soft, rhythmic chanting of monks and the rustle of the wind through the tall grass that now grows between the paving stones. You run your hand over a bas-relief of a celestial dancer, her stone skin smoothed by the touch of millions of fingers over hundreds of years. You notice how the monks who now call this mountain home have treated your work with a gentle, enduring reverence. They did not tear down the walls when the old gods began to recede into the shadows of history. Instead, they draped the statues of Vishnu in orange cloth and placed small, serene images of the Buddha at the feet of the giants. The transition from the complex hierarchies of Hinduism to the inward peace of Theravada Buddhism happened like the coming of autumn, gradual, cooling, and inevitable. You feel a strange sense of peace in this evolution. The temple was always meant to be a bridge between the earthly and the divine, and though the names of the prayers have changed, the sanctity of the stone remains untouched. The mountain you built still holds the sky, and the pilgrims still come, seeking the same solace they sought when the mortar was wet and the carvings were sharp. As the 14th century wanes and the 15th begins, you watch the great city of Angkor begin to exhale, its lungs slowly emptying of the frantic energy of empire. The royal court has moved south, seeking the safety of the rivers near Phnom Penh, leaving the stone giants to the care of the forest and the faithful. You walk through the galleries at dusk, noticing how the jungle begins its slow, green reclamation. Thick vines, like the muscular arms of wrestlers, wrap themselves around the perimeter walls, and the roots of the banyan trees begin to pry apart the joints of the lesser shrines. Yet the main temple, your masterpiece, stands defiant. The monks sweep the dust from the courtyards every morning, their brooms making a dry, rhythmic sound against the grit. They see themselves as guardians of a sacred memory, and you realize that as long as one person lights a candle in these halls, the temple is not lost. It is merely resting, breathing in the damp, cool air of the rainforest, waiting for the next heartbeat of history. The air feels heavier now, thick with the moisture of many rainy seasons, and the silence of the surrounding forest is absolute, broken only by the occasional cry of a macaque or the deep, resonant thrum of a cicada. You have lived through the shift of eras, watching the gold leaf peel away from the towers to reveal the grey, enduring bone of the mountain beneath. The world outside these walls has forgotten the names of the kings who commissioned this work, and the languages spoken in the markets have shifted and flowed like water, but the alignment you engineered remains perfect. Every year at the equinox, you watch the sun climb the central tower with the same precision it did when the world was young. It is a constant in an inconstant world, a reminder that the truth of geometry and the light of the stars do not fade with the rise and fall of thrones. Then, after many hundreds of years of this quiet, moss-covered seclusion, you hear a sound that does not belong to the forest. It is the sound of heavy boots on stone and the sharp, rhythmic hacking of machetes through the undergrowth. You watch from the shadows of a high gallery as men with pale skin and strange, heavy clothing emerge from the green wall of the jungle. They are from a world you cannot imagine, lands across vast oceans that were not even on the maps of your youth. One of them, a man with a sun-reddened face and wide, disbelieving eyes, stops at the edge of the great moat. He drops his pack, his breath catching in his throat as he looks up at the 5 towers of the Mountain of God. You see him reach for a journal, his hands trembling as he tries to find words for what he sees. He writes of a city built by giants or by the gods themselves, unable to conceive that human hands like yours, calloused and stained with stone dust, could have raised such a monument. You watch these first European explorers move through your halls with a mixture of awe and a strange colonial hunger. They touch the carvings with a frantic curiosity, measuring the heights of the doorways and sketching the faces of the apsaras. To them, this is a lost city, a mystery to be solved and catalogued. But to you, it has never been lost. It has been right here, breathing under the canopy, a sanctuary for the monks who never left and a home for the spirits of the ancestors. You feel a pang of sadness for their confusion, for their need to attribute this beauty to some vanished race of supermen, rather than the simple, enduring devotion of the Khmer people. They do not understand that the temple was never meant to be a museum. It was meant to be a living prayer, a machine for the soul that continues to function even when the gears are covered in moss. As the evening mist begins to roll in from the moat, blurring the edges of the stone and turning the jungle into a wall of soft charcoal grey, you find a quiet corner near the library. The stone beneath you is cool, holding the last lingering warmth of the day. You close your eyes and listen to the pulse of the place, the drip of water from a cracked pediment, the distant murmur of a monk finishing his evening prayers, and the rustle of the leaves in the wind. The arrival of the outsiders is just another ripple in the long history of the mountain. They will come and go, taking their sketches and their stories with them, but the temple will remain. It has survived the transition of faiths, the abandonment of kings, and the slow encroachment of the earth itself. You lean your head back against the sandstone, feeling the immense stability of the foundation you helped to lay. The weight of the world is no longer a burden. It is a comfort, a solid reality that anchors you in the stream of time. The shadows deepen, stretching long and thin across the courtyard, and you feel the familiar ache in your joints begin to soften as you drift into a state of quiet contemplation. You are no longer just an architect, or a monk, or a ghost of the past. You are the stone itself, enduring and still. The stars begin to appear in the narrow strip of sky between the gallery roofs, aligning themselves with the towers just as you intended. You realize that the purpose of your life's work was not to build something that would stay the same forever, but to build something that could hold the change, a vessel strong enough to contain the shifting beliefs of humanity and the relentless growth of nature. As you listen to the forest breathe, you feel a profound sense of completion. The mountain of God is still standing, and in the heart of the stone, the golden light of that first equinox is still burning, waiting for the sun to rise once more. The air around you has grown thick and heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and the sweet, cloying perfume of rotting fruit. It is a weight you feel against your skin, a humid blanket that seems to slow the very passage of time. As the centuries begin to blur into a long green haze, you watch from the stillness of the stone as the vibrant bustle of the capital begins to quiet. The great migrations of people, driven by changing tides of politics and the shifting of water, leave the wide boulevards of Angkor Thom and the wooden palaces of the elite to the silence of the cicadas. You feel the slow retreat of footsteps, the fading echoes of the bronze bells, and the cooling of the hearths that once warmed the city's heart. But this is not an ending. It is a transformation. You stand amidst the galleries of Angkor Wat and feel the forest beginning its slow, deliberate advance. It does not come with violence, but with a patient, rhythmic persistence. A seed, no larger than a grain of rice, finds a home in a microscopic fissure between two blocks of your carefully carved sandstone. It is the seed of the spung tree, the giant silk cotton, and as it drinks the monsoon rains, it begins to stretch. You feel the cool, thin threads of its roots as they search for purchase, winding like liquid silver through the joints of the masonry. There is a strange, paradoxical tenderness in this embrace. The roots do not merely crush, they flow. They follow the contours of your gods and your demons, tracing the curve of a dancer's waist and the bridge of a king's nose with a slow-motion intimacy that spans generations. As you lean back against a pillar, you feel the colossal weight of these trees as they rise toward the canopy, their silver-grey trunks smooth and muscular like the legs of elephants. In places like Taprom, just a short journey through the brush, the forest has claimed victory, weaving the stone into its own wooden skeleton until it is impossible to tell where the mountain ends and the tree begins. You see the massive roots cascading over the lintels like frozen waterfalls of wood, prying the blocks apart even as they hold them aloft, preventing them from crashing to the forest floor. It is a slow-motion struggle of giants, a symbiotic dance of destruction and preservation. The stone gives the tree a ladder to the sun, and the tree, in its suffocating grip, keeps the temple from dissolving back into the earth. Yet, even as the jungle swallows the surrounding cities, you notice that Angkor Wat itself remains strangely clear, like a lighthouse in a rising sea of emerald. While the wooden houses of the common folk rot away and the smaller shrines are strangled by vines, your great masterpiece is never truly forgotten. You feel the occasional sweep of a broom against the flagstones. You hear the low melodic chanting of saffron-robed monks who have remained, keeping the altars clean and the incense burning. The world may have shifted its centre to the south, to the bustling ports and new capitals, but the mountain of God remains a destination. You watch as pilgrims arrive from distant lands, from Ayutthaya, from the mountains of the north, and even from across the great oceans. They do not see a ruin, they see a living sanctuary. There is a persistent myth, one you find almost amusing in its narrowness, that will one day suggest this city was lost or discovered by explorers from far-off lands. From your vantage point in the shadows of the gallery, you know the truth is far more enduring. The city was never lost to those who lived in its shadow. You see the local farmers still planting rice in the ancient berets, their wooden ploughs turning the same rich soil their ancestors tilled 1,000 years ago. You see the children playing among the stone lions, their laughter echoing off the same walls that once heard the processions of Jayavarman VII. The jungle has changed the scenery, yes, and the gold leaf may have been stripped from the towers, but the heartbeat of the place remains steady. The relationship between the stone and the silk cotton tree becomes a physical sensation you carry in your own body. You feel the coolness of the shade provided by the canopy, a relief from the searing heat of the tropical sun. The forest protects your work from the elements, even as it threatens to dismantle it. The moss that carpets the bas-reliefs feels like velvet under your fingertips, a living skin that softens the sharp edges of the battles and the festivals you carved so long ago. You watch the sunlight filter through the high leaves, creating a shifting mosaic of light and shadow on the floor of the cruciform cloister, a dance of patterns that no architect could have planned, yet one that feels entirely right. As the decades turn into centuries, the silence of the jungle becomes a music of its own. You learn to distinguish the different tones of the rain, the light, rhythmic tapping of a spring shower, and the deafening, percussive roar of the great monsoons that turn the moats into churning seas. You feel the temple breathe with the seasons, the stone expanding slightly in the heat and contracting in the cool of the night. You are no longer just an architect of stone, you are a witness to the endurance of form. You see that while the empire may have fragmented and the languages may have evolved, the geometry you laid down, the sacred alignment of the towers with the stars, remains unbroken. The trees continue their slow climb, their roots thick as the torsos of men, coiling around the galleries like the nagas of the underworld. Sometimes a great branch will fall, its weight shaking the very foundations of the earth, but the temple absorbs the shock. You realize that your work has achieved a kind of secondary life. It has become a landscape. It is no longer a building placed upon the land, but a feature of the earth itself, as permanent as a mountain range or a riverbed. The lost city is a story told by those who do not understand the patience of the stone. To you, it is simply home, a place where the boundary between the work of man and the work of nature has finally, beautifully dissolved. You walk through the long corridors, your bare feet finding the smooth, worn hollows in the steps where millions of devotees have trodden before you. The air is still, save for the occasional flutter of a bat's wing in the high vaults of the towers. Here, in the deep shade, the scent of the jungle is replaced by the smell of ancient dust and cold minerals. It is a peaceful isolation. You are surrounded by the ghosts of your own creation, the thousands of apsaras who smile from the walls with an eternal, secret joy. They do not seem to mind the moss on their crowns or the roots that occasionally brush their stone shoulders. They, like you, understand that the temple was built to endure the embrace of the forest, to stand as a testament to a vision that transcends the rise and fall of kings. As the evening light begins to fail, casting long, violet shadows across the courtyard, you sit upon a fallen lintel and watch the fireflies begin their dance among the roots. The jungle is alive, a pulsing, breathing entity that has woven itself into the very marrow of your mountain. You feel a deep, quiet satisfaction. The gold may be gone and the silk banners may have long since rotted away, but the soul of the temple, the sacred center of the world you helped to build, remains untouched. It is held fast in the grip of the trees, protected by the very force that seeks to reclaim it, waiting in the green twilight for the next chapter of its long, long life to begin. The smell of damp earth and ancient dust settles into your skin like a familiar garment, a scent that has lingered in these corridors for 900 years. You find yourself standing in the long shadows of the Western Gallery, watching a group of men in khaki uniforms move with the slow, deliberate grace of surgeons, They are not here to worship in the way you once did, with incense and chanted mantras, yet their devotion is no less profound. You watch as they number each fallen block of sandstone, marking them with white chalk as if naming the stars. They call this process anastylosis, a word that feels heavy and strange on the tongue, but as you observe their work, you recognize the logic of it. It is the art of putting the world back together, piece by piece, using only the original stones and the silent guidance of the mountain's own geometry. The weight of the centuries feels lighter when you see a pediment, once shattered by a falling banyan tree, being hoisted back to its rightful place above a doorway. You remember the exact day that stone was carved, the rhythmic chink, chink, chink of the iron chisels echoing through the construction site, and the way the master carver's hands were stained grey with stone dust. Now, these modern guardians use steel cables and pulleys, their movements careful and reverent. They treat the sandstone as if it were glass. You notice how they struggle against the same enemies you once faced, the relentless tropical rain that turns the courtyards into lakes and the creeping, emerald-coloured lichen that eats into the delicate bas-reliefs. The stone is porous, a living thing that breathes in the humidity of the jungle, and you feel a phantom ache in your own joints as you watch the conservators gently scrub the salt and the spores from the faces of the apsaras. As the decades of the 20th century drift by like clouds over the Great Lake, you see your temple become something more than a house for the gods. It becomes an anchor for a people. You watch from the stillness of the shadows as men and women come here, not just to pray, but to remember who they are. They look at the towering gopuras and the vast, intricate carvings of the churning of the milk ocean, and you see a flicker of pride in their eyes that warms the cold stone beneath your feet. The mountain of God has become the heart of a nation, its silhouette stitched onto flags and printed on the currency that passes from hand to hand in the bustling markets beyond the moat. You realize that while the empire you served has faded into the whispers of history, the spirit you carved into these walls is the very thing that keeps the culture alive. It is a sanctuary of identity, a place where the past and the future meet in the quiet cool of the morning. The air begins to change as the night prepares to surrender to the dawn. You find yourself walking the great western causeway, the massive blocks of sandstone smooth and worn beneath your soles. The heat of the previous day has finally bled away, replaced by a soft silver mist that clings to the surface of the moat. This is the hour of the modern pilgrim. You see them arriving in the darkness, their footsteps muffled by the vastness of the space. Some carry cameras, others carry nothing but their own thoughts, but all of them walk with a certain hushed expectancy. You walk among them, a shadow among shadows, feeling the familiar vibration of the earth as the world begins to wake. The water in the moat is as still as a mirror, reflecting the stars that are slowly drowning in the growing light of the east. You stop near the edge of the northern reflecting pool, where the grass is long and cool against your ankles. The silence here is absolute, broken only by the distant, rhythmic croak of a bullfrog or the sudden, sharp cry of a bird deep within the forest canopy. You look up at the 5 central towers, those stone lotuses that you helped raise toward the heavens, and you see them as the world sees them now, not as a new construction of bright, painted stone and gilded peaks, but as a timeless monument of weathered grey and charcoal. The lichen and the rain have given the temple a patina of eternity. It no longer looks like it was built by men. It looks as though it simply grew from the earth, a natural formation of the soul. As the first hint of violet touches the horizon, the silhouette of the temple sharpens. The crowd of pilgrims has grown, yet the sense of solitude remains. You watch a young woman stand perfectly still, her hands pressed together in a silent gesture of respect, her face illuminated by the pale pre-dawn glow. You feel a connection to her, a bridge spanning 9 centuries, built of shared wonder and the same human need to stand before something greater than oneself. The architecture you designed was meant to be a map of the cosmos, a way for the common man to walk through the heavens, and as you see the awe on the faces of these modern travelers, you know that the map still works. The geometry is still true. The alignment with the sun and the stars remains perfect, as if the mountain itself is breathing in sync with the universe. The light shifts from violet to a soft, dusty rose, and then to a burning orange that catches the very tips of the towers. This is the moment you lived for, the moment when the stone seems to catch fire and the dark galleries are suddenly flooded with gold. You see the reflection in the pool ripple as a light breeze sweeps across the water, shattering the image of the temple into 1,000 shimmering pieces before it settles once again. The sandstone warms under the touch of the sun, and you can almost feel the heat radiating into your own chest. The guardians in their khaki uniforms are starting their day's work. The tourists are beginning to move toward the inner sanctums, and the monks in their saffron robes are crossing the courtyards like bright flames against the grey stone. You linger for a moment longer on the causeway, feeling the weight of your tools in your ghostly hands and the satisfaction of a job well done. The jungle may try to reclaim the walls, and the rains may try to wash away the carvings, but as long as there is someone to walk this path at dawn, the mountain of God will endure. You turn to follow the light into the heart of the temple, moving through the galleries where the apsaras seem to dance in the shifting shadows. The stone is warm now, vibrating with the life of a new day, and you walk with the steady, measured pace of a man who knows he is home. The story of the temple is no longer yours alone. It belongs to everyone who gazes upon it. A dream of stone and water that refuses to fade, standing firm against the slow, inevitable turning of the world. The chisel in your hand has grown light over the decades, or perhaps your grip has simply become an extension of the metal itself, a bond forged through millions of strikes against the grey-green sandstone. You lean your shoulder against a heavy pillar in the outer gallery, feeling the rough texture of a carved vine pressing through your tunic. A small detail you finished when your hair was still dark and your joints did not ache with the coming of the rains. There is a profound stillness that settles over the complex in these late hours, a silence that is not an absence of sound, but a fullness of presence. The thousands of labourers have returned to their villages. The elephants have been led to their wallows, and the chanting of the priests has drifted upward into the high, vaulted ceilings of the sanctuary, leaving you alone with the mountain you helped to raise from the mud of the floodplain. You look down at your palms, where the skin is as thick and patterned as the bark of a teak tree, and you realize that your own body has been spent in exchange for this permanence. Every ounce of your strength, every flicker of your creative vision has been poured into these stones, flowing out of your fingertips and into the foundations of the world. It is a strange and humbling thought to know that you are fading while the work is only just beginning its long life. You are a creature of breath and bone, destined to return to the earth. But the temple is a creature of geometry and spirit, designed to stand until the stars themselves change their positions in the heavens. You find a quiet satisfaction in this trade, a sense of peace that comes from knowing you have anchored your soul to something that does not fear the passage of time. As you walk toward the western causeway, your sandals click softly against the massive blocks of laterite, and you notice how the light catches the edges of the bas-reliefs, turning the epic battles of the gods into a shimmering tapestry of bronze and gold. You stop to trace the outline of an apsara's smile, remembering the young sculptor who spent 3 months perfecting that single curve, his face dusted with white powder and his eyes bright with the intensity of his task. He is gone now, moved on to other projects or perhaps resting in the shade of his ancestral home, but his devotion remains fixed here in the stone, a silent witness to the love that went into every inch of this sacred space. This is the true legacy of the Khmer architect, not just the grand scale of the towers or the engineering of the vast moats, but the collective heartbeat of thousands of men and women who believed that they could build a gateway to the divine. The air begins to cool as the moisture rises from the surrounding water, bringing with it the scent of lotus blossoms and damp earth. You find a seat on the edge of the great stone embankment, letting your feet dangle toward the dark, still surface of the moat. The water is a mirror today, reflecting the 5 great towers with such clarity that it seems as though there is a second temple built of liquid and shadow, stretching down into the depths of the earth. You think about the mountain of God, the Meru you have constructed here in the heart of Cambodia, and how it serves as a bridge between the mundane and the eternal. It is a physical manifestation of a prayer, a mountain that does not crumble, a forest that does not wither, a sea that does not dry up. Even when the names of the kings are forgotten and the languages of the court have changed, these stones will continue to speak the same truth to anyone who stands where you are standing now. There is a rhythm to the fading light that matches the rhythm of your own breathing. You watch as the deep oranges and purples of the sky begin to bleed into the grey of the stone, softening the sharp angles of the pediments and blurring the lines between the earth and the heavens. You feel a deep, resonant connection to the architects who came before you, and to those who will come long after you are gone, those who will look at these towers and wonder how such a thing was possible. They will see the magnitude of the labour, the precision of the alignment, and the beauty of the form. But you hope they also feel the quiet intent behind it. You hope they feel the steady pulse of a people who reached for the infinite and, for a brief and shining moment, caught it in their hands. The weight in your limbs is heavy now, a comfortable tiredness that speaks of a life well lived and a purpose fully realized. You lean back against the cool stone, closing your eyes for a moment, and you can almost hear the mountain breathing. It is a slow, tectonic sound, the sound of settled weight and enduring strength. The temple does not strive, it simply is. It has survived the monsoons, the heat of 1,000 summers, and the shifting fortunes of empires, and it sits now in the gathering dusk like a king on a throne of silence. You realize that your work was never about conquering nature or asserting dominance over the landscape, but about finding a way to harmonize with the laws of the universe, to build something that feels as natural and as inevitable as the rising of the sun. As the last sliver of the sun disappears behind the horizon, the great moat turns to a ribbon of dark silver, and the towers of Angkor Wat become silhouettes against a sky of deepest indigo. The world is retreating into sleep, and you find yourself ready to follow. The journey of the architect is complete, the plans have been laid, the stones have been set, and the mountain is finished. You stand up slowly, your movements deliberate and calm, and take one last look at the reflection in the water. The temple is glowing with a faint inner light, as if the stones themselves have absorbed the warmth of the day and are now breathing it back out into the night. It is a beautiful, eternal sight, a dream made solid, a mountain of God that will stand as long as there are eyes to see it and hearts to wonder at its mystery. You turn away from the water and begin the slow walk back toward the flickering torches of the city, feeling the cool grass beneath your feet and the vast, starry sky opening up above you. The path is familiar, the air is sweet, and the silence is your companion. You leave the temple to the night, knowing that it is safe, knowing that it is whole. The story of the stone is written, and as you find your way to your own bed, the image of the 5 towers remains etched behind your eyelids, a steady and unchanging anchor in the drifting currents of sleep. The mountain remains, the water remains, and you, the builder, are finally at rest.